Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hi, welcome to the New York Parrot Literary Corner. I am Dustin Pickering, your inevitable host, and I'm very lovable too some days. We have today Les Bernstein, the only and greatest program for global voices. Les Bernstein's poems have appeared in journals, presses, and anthologies in the USA and internationally. Her chapbooks, Borderland, Naked Little Creatures, and Amid the Den, have been published by Finishing Line Press. Les is a winner of the 6th annual Nazim Hikmet Festival. She also was a Pushcart Prize nominee for 2015. She has been the editor at Redwood Writers Anthologies for 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021, and also the editor of the Marin High School Anthology 2018. Her full-length book, Loose Magic, will be released by Finishing Line Press in November 2021. She lives in Mill Valley with her enormous family. Thanks for joining us today, Les. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. I can't wait to hear more about your work and your exploits in literature. So how is it to see your first, is this your first full-length collection, Loose Magic, that's coming out in this
Yeah,
this
it
year?
will be the first one, yes.
So how does that feel, and how long did it take you to put this together?
Well, it took years to get all the poems, but I put it together within a month, and it seemed to have a natural coherence as to what would go where, which I was surprised because it seemed very daunting to begin with to try to put 130 poems together. But there did seem to be a rhyme and a reason to it.
So just some of the themes just naturally were taking place as you were writing them. It sort of happened spontaneously, and you were putting it together. You realized the themes were there. You know, what kind of subjects do you approach in the book? Is it something that, I mean, it sounds interesting that you sort of naturally kind of gravitated towards certain things. What were some of those things?
Well, there are some things. I like to joke with people when they ask me what kind of things do I write. I always say all death, all day, as most poets do. So we had a little coherence on that theme. I occasionally will get a little bit political. For a while, I was writing about 7 or 8 years ago with a pseudonym called Shanti Rosenblatt, where I wrote just like really wacky, funny poems that I didn't want my own name on, but they're in the book. And so mostly there's a particular voice I think that I have that is throughout.
Interesting. So this voice, I mean, did you ever feel like it was something you've developed over the years and writing your own poetry, or maybe was there some mentors that influenced you to sort of develop that and bring that out?
Well, I was brought up by 2 free-range existentialists who also wrote a little bit. I think that I've always been kind of looking from the outside in at things. And I found a great deal of comfort in poetry when I was very, very young, like maybe 15, 16 years old. I discovered Coney Island of the Mind by Ferlinghetti.
Yes.
Who just died at 101. Can you imagine?
Wow. Yeah. Amazing guy. Amazing.
It was like an awakening for me. It was like a spiritual awakening that somebody could write like that. So I did start to write then, and one of my poems, I wrote an anti-Vietnam poem, somehow made its way to a very popular radio station, a very popular DJ in New York, Murray the K, and his other Roscoe, who was on later and did mostly jazz and soul and all that. And they read it, so it was kind of a yes validation for me to like, okay, you can do this,
Right. Getting the recognition, obviously, it makes you feel a little bit more like you're on the right track, and you're not just speaking in a vacuum or into a void, and people, are actually paying attention. It makes it a lot more enjoyable to speak, to somebody there, when they listen. Did you have any reactions to that, or somebody say, hey, that's a great poem, or?
No, I didn't get any real feedback from it, but to hear it on the radio was really, really something. And you know how much rejection there is in poetry. So when you have at least something under, in your back pocket, it kind of makes the rejections go down with a little bit of, a teaspoon of sugar makes the rejection go down easier. So yeah, so it helped.
Definitely, yeah, absolutely. So, one of the poems I've read of yours, you sent us a couple. I was curious about this, the poem Angel MIA, and you open with the rabbinic commentary, and what were you trying to say about the poem itself by opening it with that?
Well, I was saying that there's a possibility that there may be an order to the universe that is a benevolent order, but who knows?
Right.
There's a lot of people with a lot of different theories, and you'll see at one point I suggest covering them like a parrot that you wish to silence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And so it's sort of like a selective attention kind of thing, like you pay attention to what out there, the ideas out there that actually make sense, or that, to you, or to, some people you just would like to silence, or there also the idea, the dominant idea that sometimes comes to people, about maybe we're completely abandoned in the world, and maybe it's not so benevolent, so it's kind of like a multiple ways of looking at that parrot you mentioned. I think that, I mean, all the various doubts we have about our existence, that's what I got out of it. So
Would you like me to read it? Would you like me to read that one?
Sure, feel free. I'd love to hear you read it.
I'm going to do it then.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's called Angel MIA, and it starts with that quote: "Every blade of grass has its angel that hovers over it and whispers, 'Grow, grow.' In a dark corridor, the last speaker of a familiar language has died, leaving only tangles and absence. Attendant ideas and torrents of anecdotes cannot translate seamlessly what lies beneath gleaming surfaces. You once said, 'Believe those who seek truth, doubt those who are certain of it. Cover them like a parrot you wish to silence.' You said looking outside is a dream, a convenient fiction. Good luck with that. Tell me, who is going to teach radiant oneness, be a beacon, transcendent and alive? Who will whisper, 'Grow'?"
There's so much depth in that, and I love just, I don't, I can't really add too much to it. I mean, more than I've said. It's a wonderful poem. It's quite interesting, and you portray the doubts we may have so well in that, who is whispering "grow" to us, and to, do we have, is there a benevolent creator? How do we know? I mean, but that's always seems to be the idea that we develop for ourselves, is that we have something is trying to push us forward constantly. We have to keep moving in all these various conflicts and difficulties. We're supposed to somehow we're triumphing through them, and that seems to be our optimism that speaks to us and keeps us going. But yeah, it's a wonderful poem, because you kind of say, well, that's what you kind of take that as the starting point and say, well, who is this person? What is it that's going on here in the world? And so you doubt all those doubts come out. So I wondered, you went to you won, or you were nominated, or I'm not sure, for the Nazim Hikmet Festival, I believe.
I won, and I actually made money.
So you were paid for this. Okay, wonderful. That's wonderful. It's always great to get money for your writing. It's always a positive. So do you feel allied with him, or was there a reason why you got involved in that?
I just, I've read not all of his work, but a lot of his work, and there was just something about his time in prison that really struck me as a metaphor for the time sometimes we are living in, that we are in. It's inescapable, the chaos that we live in. It's almost like being incarcerated in it. So so I had written this poem, which I could actually read. You were talking about all the poems that I have for you.
Excellent. We'll just intersperse them through. Yeah, that's a great idea. I think that's wonderful.
This is the poem. There's actually was a series of 3 poems that won, but this is, I think, the one that really did it for me. So it's called Intent on Restoring Disorder. History lumbers on, unstoppable, insinuating, while birds and everyone else sing the same phrases over and over. Fleeing angels correct their course, seeking a fresh exit strategy as the dung beetle orients itself by the light of the Milky Way. Its life is flat as a comic strip. The clouds whisper to each other, left only to bear witness. They sigh the name of the space in between. Although details are in dispute, time goes by in an amnesic drift. The past, with exultation and ache, anticipates the future's return.
That's a very existential piece. I can see the influence there in the existentialist, as you mentioned earlier, fellow existentialist here.
Yeah.
That's something I absorbed as a kid, and I still, adore some of those thinkers and so forth. So, I mean, going back to the poetry, you had a book, and I found this online, called The Archangel of Damage. What is the history of this? It sounded like it had a really interesting history behind it. And what is it like seeing this come to print and have this actually out in the world?
That was Trump. Thank you.
That's sort of the allegory.
Yeah, he was the perturbation for that.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Very interesting. So with some of the poems, or what kind of themes? I mean, did you write strictly about Trump and the policies he's doing? And
I barely went there because it was toxic enough as is to spend time writing about it. But I think that I probably was glued to CNN for a while, and suddenly it was like, wow, look what's going on here, and that poem just sort of flew out of me.
Wow.
I try not to be topical. I think that there are meta conversations that are much more interesting.
Definitely. I think that's actually a challenge that I've asked the other poets we've interviewed, is like, how do you write topical poetry? Poetry kind of has this tinge of the eternal or tinge of the sublime. It's really hard to write on like news items and things like that. But some people can do a pretty good job, I think. But yeah, it is tough because you want to capture that snapshot of the human condition, or whatever, and it's difficult already. Doing the topical stuff, it is tricky. So speaking of Trump and the various I didn't want to. I was surprised when you said that was Trump. I was like, okay, well, that leads into the next question perfectly. So this is a general question, and of course, it's your opinion. How can poetry and the arts combat irrational hatred like racism, anti-Semitism? How do you feel that the arts are combative towards these into ultimately the ideal of a democratic, open society? How do we contribute to that?
I wish I could answer that. It's a larger question than I'm equipped to answer. I just try to live my own little world in loving kindness. And that's all I can do, is be as best I can be. I work a lot with the high school poetry anthology that I was the judge for and the editor for. We had it was 1,200 entries from all the schools in Marin County. And the person who won, the boy who won, was actually incarcerated at the time. And he wrote this extraordinary poem about why, it was kind of like, why can't we all get along kind of poem. And it was really, really powerful. And from there, he wound up on the front page of the local newspaper. He wound up being kind of taken under the wing by people who could provide him a good job. And that little contest changed his life.
Wow.
And he was, he sort of had a little thug thing going, but it was interesting to watch him change. He had to read his poem at a big auditorium gathering for winning this prize. He won money also. And he was nervous. He wore a suit, and he came over and he told me how nervous and scared he was to get up and talk in front of people. And here's this guy, he's kind of thuggish, and yet his carapace had been cracked open And there was
Wow.
this beautiful poet, this gorgeous poet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you never know where the where poetry is going to be born. You know, it's a very interesting phenomenon to watch people find their hidden creativity, and we talk a lot about that on the program as well. As like we find people that are, you know, maybe reluctant or not sure of themselves, and they just open up, and it just flows out. You know, we've talked to a lot of people, and they've said that in teaching they found that to be the case a lot of times. So, do you find that?
My son was very good friends with Tupac Shakur, who used to stay at our home. And Tupac was an extraordinary poet.
Yes.
An extraordinary poet. And he wasn't what his persona was. He was a very sensitive and really intelligent, educated person.
Right. I always assume that of him. You know, it is a persona. I mean, that's music. It's, you know, it's intended to be kind of a projection or something entertaining. It's not intended to be this is me, you know. I always assume that of him, and I actually met Nikki Giovanni a few years back, and she's a huge fan.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, I'm not as big a fan of her poetry, but I did like her quite a bit. She was very friendly. So moving on, you know, it's interesting mentioning this. Do you think poetry can play a role as a social criticism, or do you think that the poets have a role in human progress in that sense?
You know, I don't really know. I will tell you that as the editor of the Sonoma Poetry Redwood Writers with my friend Fran Claggett, we had those devastating fires twice, not once, but twice. And what we did was we opened up we actually had the anthology all ready to go. And then we had the fires, and we just stopped presses, opened it up, and did a whole other section. But it was almost at the same amount of pages as the first section on people's experience of the fire. And I was told that by allowing them to not only, revisit it in an artistic manner, but to also see themselves in print. Some of these people, was their first publication, that they had ever had, was in some ways very cathartic and very healing in a way that made it a little less bitter, going back to an empty plot where your house used to be.
Right. That is definitely a devastating thing, and I agree that that being able to write about it gives you a little more leverage psychologically against the trauma and the pain of loss. I went through grief periods in my life before I wrote, and it helps me quite a bit. So I think that's very good that you brought these kinds of formations out. It's wonderful. So how often do you write? Do you have a regular habit, or do you just write when it feels like the moment's there? Or?
Yeah. I do a lot of, editing and a lot of judging contests and stuff, and I can get swept up in that. And also I have to have something that's sort of like, like a little grit in the shell to cause me to have to sit down to the computer. And it's strange because I can work on a poem for months on end. I can actually re-edit a poem that's already been published because I'm crazy that way. But then I'll have sometimes a poem that'll just fly out. In fact, I have one for you that actually was published in Oxford Literary Magazine.
Oh, wow.
I'm embarrassed to say that it took me 20 minutes to write.
Wow. If you want to read that, feel free. I would love to hear it.
Yeah, okay. So it's called Bifocals. The psychic said he had made contact with my mother. She was wearing glasses, large ones. I was sure she could lose those in the afterlife. What about her hearing aids? Where was she getting batteries? And her diabetic testing supplies? What about dialysis? Were there kidney support centers? Did she have to watch her salt intake? What about her compression socks and her thyroid medication and a tiny little antidepressant pill she took so she wouldn't mind dying organ by organ so much?
And that, you said, took 20 minutes to write that?
Yeah. I don't think there were any edits.
Wow. So it's sometimes that happens. Sometimes the best work can come just like that, spit it on the page and it's there. And that is a very deep poem. And again, it goes back to death and existentialism and, is there an afterlife, or what is the afterlife? Is there a God? Some of the themes that you said you frequently return to. Do you feel that your poetry accurately portrays the reflections that you have that sort of compel the poems?
Yeah, I do. I don't have any interest in writing pretty poems.
Right. Right. So it feels like when you have these various obsessions and whatnot they could be, ruminations, they come out pretty well, and your poetry, when you're writing them, to when they come out on the page, you don't look at it and say, well, that's not quite what I wanted to say. Maybe I need to look into that a little further and maybe tinker with it a little bit, or add a few things to it or something.
But that's what Control Delete is for.
There you go. I mean, that's what it makes it easier. The technology makes it much easier. I can't imagine sitting in the candlelight with, penning this with a quill, like I can't imagine what that would be like for some of our, past writers, that were able to write 300-page books in 2 months or whatever. No telling, some of them took years, some of them took a few months. I don't know. I guess it's an obsession, So that's wonderful. It's great. I mean, I think it really impresses me that that you write, when you write, you find that you've accurately portrayed your reflections. Sometimes I have trouble doing that. So if you like to read another,
occasionally when you're doing something that maybe is not successful, and you've gone off track a little bit, and it starts getting conceptual, there may be yet like a paragraph, there may be like a shadow poem there. It's not in what's said, but it's in what's not said, and in there is something that's really worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that I do a lot of times write poems within poems that don't quite the pieces don't work within a whole frame, that I can take it out and move it to another page and then work with it there. And it's sometimes, for me, that's very effective, and I do enjoy that. So if you'd like to read another poem for us, feel free.
Okay, I will. I'm going to read the one that was, I pulled the poems here that we talked about, but I'm going to read the one that got nominated for the Pushcart Prize by my wonderful editor, Leah Maines, from Finishing Line Press.
Wonderful, yes. Very friendly person.
She is the best. So it's called And Yet. Bonobos use symbols to communicate. Border collies know 1,000 words. Dolphins have a rudimentary number sense. Crows make sophisticated tools. Elephants recognize themselves in mirrors. Reptiles have their insanely good looks. Resembling a bloated kielbasa with dentures, the naked mole rat runs forward and backward at the same pace. If their mate is unattractive, the zebra finch, unwilling to propagate, lays smaller, unsurvivable eggs. The bowerbird enjoys decorating with flowers and bright colors. No plaid is involved. And for human phenomenon, your unsayable absence, reduced to a bald plot, plumbs the futility of grief.
Oh wow, especially love the last lines. And one of the things I gather there is how much in common we have with various animals, and that's another question about divinity, is how, we have so much common with animals. We're always told, we're like some sort of special organism or something, and we have knowledge of the divine or whatever, but how do we really know that for sure? And it's a beautiful poem.
Bipeds.
We're kind of arrogant sometimes, if you ask me. We can be pretty arrogant creatures. I imagine all creatures can be arrogant. We have to be to survive in some ways. So we have about a remaining 5 or 6 minutes. If you want to, give some shout outs or say, thank you to some people who've influenced you, as well as some words of, encouragement and wisdom to the crowd out there,
Okay, so a couple of things. One is, I would say to anybody that's writing, don't let the rejections get you down. The poem Bifocals was rejected by a very small literary press that I thought I was doing them a favor to send it to. And instead they rejected it, because then I just sent it out to Oxford and they just snatched it right up.
Wow.
So you can't, sometimes it's a matter of, well, here's an example. I sometimes write very small poems, And I sent a poem to a publication and they rejected it. And then 2 weeks later, they wrote back to me and they said, well, do you have another one like that? And I said, well, actually, I have a companion poem. And then I said, well, send it to us. I sent it to us. And what they did was they put it in the center of the book. And the problem with the poem that they rejected was the size. They just didn't know how to fit it in with what they were doing. So once they had one opposite it, they found a place for it. But at first it was a rejection. So you never know what you don't know if they're looking for a theme. You don't know if the editor has a headache that day. I mean, you just don't know. So don't let it discourage you. My grandmother, who was Jewish, she would say, there's a lid for every pot. There's a home for every poem.
Right. Absolutely. So if you want to say, thank you to people who've influenced you over the period of your writing career, or just, of course, Leah, of course, would be one.
Yeah, my influenced me. Well,
people that have kept you going.
Ferlinghetti. I'm wildly in love with Ted Kooser.
Oh yes.
I mean, I am obsessed with him. I actually think I might have a crush.
It happens. It happens.
To the best of us, right? I love Stanley Kunitz. I love Merwin. I love Ada Limon. I love Natalie Diaz. God, there's just so many. I'm a reader. I am a reader, and there's just so much that is like inspirational and kind of forces you to sit in front of the blank page, which is, as you know, a terrifying experience. So yeah,
very intimidating. Very
intimidating, and I'm grateful to all the poets who let me see their work and let me publish them. So I feel very blessed in many ways.
Absolutely, and poetry is like, to me, it's just the ultimate blessing to be able to write and experience poetry. It's something so beautiful. It's unimaginable to anything else. I mean, I can't imagine being without it.
Me neither.
Well, do you have any contests coming up, or some anthologies or something you would like to invite people to submit to?
Oh, okay. So we've been doing a program for the Sebastopol Center for the Arts called Poetry Project. It's actually called Why Poetry, and it's not a question. It's also a statement. It's why poetry? Well, poetry is healing. Poetry is a mystery. Poetry causes your brain to go into a place that it's not normally going into, which is probably good for your brain.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what we've been doing there is we have been both talking about poets and studying their poetry. We did a whole evening on oral tradition. There's a people that do the Rumi Caravan. And what that is that they memorize. They've memorized like something like 500 poems. They're like kind of like poetic jukeboxes. And one person will recite a poem and the other person will answer with another poem. And it's really extraordinary to watch them do this. And it's not just simply about memorization and not simply just about poetry. It actually is a spiritual practice. So that we just did that, and it was very, very well received. We're now going to do, the next one will be on ekphrastic poetry, which we just did. There was a book done where we were given pieces of artworks and told to write poetry to it. And at first I was like, no, I don't write like that. I can't do that. And then I got a picture. My painting was Ed Ruscha's blank billboard. And I just took one look at this thing and I had skid marks getting to the computer. I knew exactly what I was going to do. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful book. The next iteration of that is going to be, they've asked us poets to give a poem to an artist. So they will be creating the artwork from the poem. So
wow,
it's fabulous. It's really exciting. So that's in the works. And then I'm going to be once again editing the Redwood Writers Poetry Anthology for next year, which I really love. And we just finished that contest. And I was also just a judge at the California State Poetry. No, it's California Writers Poetry Society. Yeah. So I've been a busy girl.
Very busy. I can tell, just so much going on, and so many poetry activities working, constantly. Same here. I run a press. I do the Parrot. I do a lot of things. So it's really enjoyable to do. And I'm glad to have spoken with you today. It's interesting, and I'm especially fascinated by the existentialism, and then Tupac, of course. I grew up around huge Tupac fans. That was my thing. When I was growing up in 7th, 8th grade. That's how young I am, I guess. But thank you again. It's been wonderful talking with you, Les. And we're gonna go ahead and close out. And this has been the New York Parrot Literary Corner. And out there, if you guys want to subscribe, we're looking for 1 million subscribers. I know we can do this. So please subscribe. Just hit that subscribe button. I'm Dustin Pickering, and you can also donate to the Parrot to help us continue our journey forward at paypal.me/nyparrot. That's paypal.me/nyparrot. The link will be in the video down at the bottom there. Just take a look. And anyway, it's been a wonderful afternoon with Les Bernstein. We talked about existentialism. We talked about all kinds of interesting things. So if you missed a little bit of it, go back and watch it again. It'll be a fun experience for all of us to see, for you to see this again. And we're doing an anthology in August. So hopefully we'll have all of our guests contribute to that. We're working on that towards that. So that will be coming up soon. Just keep an eye out and tell others. And if you want a platform, if you're out there and you need some voice to your art and you want to talk with us, you can get in touch with me at literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com. That's literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com. And again, thank you, Les. It's been wonderful talking to you. And I am Dustin Pickering. This has been the New York Parrot Literary Corner. You will not know where we will be tomorrow. We could be anywhere. We're global, and we're looking for all kinds of people all over the world. So keep an eye out. Thank you very much. See you. There we go. She is on. And here I am by myself, all by myself. Well, I'll wait for the minute to cross out and we'll cut out here. It's been wonderful with all you guys out there. Please keep an eye out again for us. Just keep out. Don't give up. Keep writing. Please do not feed the bears. They're not hungry anyway. So have a good day. I'm Dustin Pickering.